Hello everyone. Good morning. I hope I'm audible. आवाज आ रही है ना? All right. Thank you. So previously we had covered the section of Vijayanagar and Bahmani Sultanate, and now our next topic is going to be the Bhakti and Sufi movements. First of all, we are going to address Bhakti movement. Right. Now, what are the themes that we'll be covering? The origin and rise of Bhakti, Nirgun Bhakti, Sagun Bhakti, the role of Bhakti in culture and literature, the historiography of the Bhakti movement, the role of women in medieval Bhakti, right? And the role of Bhakti in culture and literature, वो हम already कर चुके हैं, ठीक है? So these are the topics that we are going to cover within the Bhakti movement. Origin and rise of Bhakti, Nirgun Bhakti, Sagun Bhakti, the role of Bhakti in culture and literature or the contribution of Bhakti to culture, the historiography of Bhakti movement and the role of women in medieval Bhakti. Now, first of all, the origin and rise of medieval Bhakti. When we say medieval Bhakti, we refer to the various Bhakti cults and sects which emerged in North India from the 13th century onwards. ठीक है? These were reformative in nature. They called for both religious and social equality. They represented a reaction against the oppressive and feudal Brahmanical order of the preceding age, of the Rajput age, as well as a response to the cruel and oppressive Islamic power which had emerged recently in North India. These movements had their roots in ancient Indian Bhakti of the Gupta period. However, they represented the revival of Bhakti as a popular movement in North India after several centuries. Okay? They also borrowed some elements from Islam, specifically the liberal branch of Islam known as Sufism. In fact, this medieval North Indian Bhakti represented the assimilation of various cultural streams, both popular and Brahmanical themes, folk and feudal streams and tribal and Vedic culture. Although the Bhakti movements of the medieval age shared these characteristics, they were inherently quite diverse. There was a great degree of heterogeneity. Since the Bhakti movement expressed itself in different manners over time and space during the medieval age. Right? And since we have linked medieval Bhakti of North India to ancient Indian Bhakti, let us look at these historical antecedents. Bhakti, which stands for the cult of devotionalism, emerged as a philosophical movement during the pre-Gupta age. It was not confined only to Brahmanism, rather, it was first observed in the context of Buddhism with the emergence of Mahayana Buddhism during the pre-Gupta period, the post-Mauryan age. However, it was transformed into a popular movement during the Gupta age, with the emergence of the temple cult and the compilation of the bulk of devotional literature associated with Brahmanism, that is Puranic literature. The combination of Puranic literature and temple cult transformed Bhakti from a philosophical movement into a popular and practical cult, into a popular and practical sect. However, during the Gupta and post Gupta ages, the Bhakti movement in North India underwent somewhat of a decline due to the incorporation of Bhakti within the feudalism framework, right? So Bhakti emerged as an extension of feudalism. So the dominance of feudal tendencies over Bhakti took the agency associated with the Bhakti movement away from the common people and vested it firmly in the hands of the elites, the feudal elite as well as their Brahmanical allies. So Bhakti, in essence, in North India was hijacked by Brahmanism. Okay? During this period, there was another major movement going on in North India, and that was the emergence of Tantricism. So Bhakti was also overshadowed by Tantricism during the Gupta and post-Gupta ages. This resulted in the overall decline of North Indian Bhakti during the ancient period. However, it was during this time that the Bhakti cult appeared for the first time in South India. The emergence of Tamil Bhakti under the Pallavas took place under the initiative of Alvar and Nayanar saints. Alvars were Vaishnavite and Nayanars were Shaivite Tamil Bhakti saints. Now, these Alvar and Nayanar saints, although they represented, or many of them came from the Brahmanical background, many of them also came from the lower castes. ठीक है? तो यहाँ पे आपको क्या देखने के लिए मिलेगा? Social reformism, right? So anti Brahmanical protest was expressed through Tamil Bhakti. The Tamil Bhaktas accepted followers from all backgrounds, irrespective of their caste. Their appeal among the people was largely a result of the medium that they used to express their devotionalism. कैसे express करते थे अपने devotionalism को? Through very highly emotive songs and poems. So, Tamil literature was used to compose devotional songs and poems. With the extension of agriculture under the initiative of the Pallava rulers, many of the tribal groups, which till now had not been part of the socio-economic mainstream, were brought into the agrarian social society and economy. Each of them had their own gods and goddesses. Now, Tamil Bhakti was able to incorporate these varied gods and goddesses under the umbrellas of either Vaishnavism or Shaivism. So they also played a very important role in the assimilation of tribals into the South Indian mainstream. Now, while the same process has also happened in North India, that was done under Brahmanical domination. यहाँ पे, because the Alwar and Nayanar saints had adopted an anti-Brahmanical protest-like outlook and accepted followers from all backgrounds, including the lower castes, they emerged as the advocates of these groups. As a result, early Tamil Bhakti exhibited the characteristics of social and religious, protest and reform. ठीक है? However, like in North India, Tamil Bhakti also underwent a major evolution. This took place during the 10th to the 12th centuries, during the rule of the Cholas. During this period, Tamil Bhakti movement came under the leadership of great philosophical teachers and saints known as the Acharyas. These included people such as Vallabhacharya, Madhavacharya, Ramanujacharya, etc. Right? Now, all of them came from the Brahmanical background. ठीक है? One pillar upon which this Chola state was erected was an alliance between the kings, between the ruling class and the priestly class. Therefore, the Bhakti of the Acharyas also represented this priest-prince nexus. तो अब बताइए, इस भक्ति going to retain its popular sentiment, its popular roots, or is it going to become a tool in the hands of the elites once again? It is going to become an elite instrument of control and power. Therefore, like North Indian Bhakti, Tamil Bhakti was also converted into an elite led movement and lost its reformative and popular character. ठीक है? At the same time, the Acharyas were able to strike a balance in the field of religion. They accepted or conceded to the principle of equality, that all groups, irrespective of their class background or irrespective of their caste background, would be able to practice their religion without any restrictions. So every person would have the right to participate in religious practices. However, at the same time, in matters of social interaction, the Brahmanical principle of hierarchy was also adopted. So while the Acharyas accepted the principle of religious equality, they emphasized upon the principle of social inequality, maintaining strict caste and varna-based divisions. ठीक है? The Bhakti movement, which had almost disappeared by this point of time from North India, was reintroduced to North India by the disciples of one of the Acharyas. एक आचार्य थे Ramanujacharya, the person who had come up with this compromise. One of his disciples was Ramanand. Now, although he was a Telugu Brahmin, he remained in Banaras and preached at Banaras throughout his life. He was a disciple of Ramanujacharya. And he is credited with reintroducing Bhakti in North India. Now, although he was a disciple of Ramanujacharya who emphasized upon social distinctions, Ramanand accepted disciples from all backgrounds. His most famous disciple being the Nirgun Bhakti saint Kabir, who would go on to lay the foundations of his own Bhakti sect, the Kabir Panth. Then from here, the tradition of Bhakti spread across North India as a reformative reaction against oppressive and feudal Brahminical order and a response to the cruel and oppressive Islamic power in North India. It represented the revival of Bhakti as a popular movement in North India after several centuries and also borrowed freely from Islam, especially Sufism. ठीक है? So यहाँ से ये चेन अब कंटिन्यू हो. Now, एक क्वेश्चन इमर्ज होता है, what were the factors for the emergence of medieval bhakti in North India. इसको एक और तरह से हम फ्रेम कर सकते हैं. What were the factors that bhakti as a popular movement remained absent from North India during the Rajput age? ठीक है, तो एक को आंसर करेंगे, दूसरा उसका मिरर इमेज होगा. ठीक है, वी आर गोइंग टू एड्रेस दिस वन, फैक्टर्स फॉर द इमर्जेंस ऑफ medieval bhakti in North India. So what was that major event which triggered the emergence of North Indian medieval bhakti? अब देखो, bhakti was a long drawn, complex and extremely diverse phenomenon. Could it have arisen due to a single factor or a number of factors acting together? Complex factors would have been involved, तभी ना complex reality वो बनाएगा. So several factors were responsible, including political factors, socio-economic factors, and religious and cultural factors. First of all, the political factors. कौन सा मेजर पॉलिटिकल चेंज हुआ है इन medieval India? The emergence of Turkish rule, right? And with the emergence of Turkish rule, what has it destroyed? The Rajput power over North India. And Rajput power over North India was the result of a nexus between the ruling class and the priestly class. So by destroying the Rajput Brahmin alliance, the Turks created the space for the emergence of non-conformist intellectual sects and popular movements to which this order had been hostile till now. Okay? Secondly, with the establishment of Turkish rule, there was decline of feudalism. Now, feudalism is a restrictive framework which prohibits the emergence of new movements, ideologies, emergence of new classes. It seeks to maintain the status quo under the control of the elites, Rajputs and Brahmins. by destroying feudalism, a number of energies which till now had been kept locked, they were allowed to release and express themselves freely. So this was another reason for the emergence of medieval bhakti. And thirdly, because the Turks were able to break the dominance of the Rajput Brahmin alliance and establish a state which was hostile to this class, they emerged, the state emerged as a natural ally of all those groups and all those ideologies which stood against this alliance and this worldview. Okay? So there was loss of royal patronage and emergence of hostile state against Brahmanism. ठीक है? So these are the political factors. Next set of factors, the socio-economic factors. Once again, the decline of feudalism and rise of urbanization resulted in the emergence of new crafts groups and urban classes. What was the status of these groups within the Brahmanical social order? Were they given a high rank or low rank? Low rank they had been given traditionally. Now they were looking for alternatives. So they emerged as not only the chief proponents but also the chief beneficiaries of medieval Bhakti. Secondly, while the path to salvation under traditional Brahmanism was only available to renunciants, medieval bhakti stood for a healthy balance between worldly and spiritual life. And this balance had become increasingly important. Why? Because this was the period of urban revival and economic growth. People wanted to have the best of both worlds, and that option was not available to them under Brahmanism. It was only available to them under Bhakti. Okay? So, pursuit of balance between spiritual nourishment and worldly life brought the people closer to medieval Bhakti or made medieval Bhakti attractive since it did not emphasize upon renunciation as the path towards salvation. Thirdly, due to the establishment of political unity and the revival of trade, North India had become more connected than it had been for the past 500-600 years. And with the exchange of goods and services, exchange of ideas also became possible along the flourishing trade routes. Many new cities emerged, many of the old cities were revived, and these cities emerged as the engines and factories of new ideas, new ideological streams. So there was great degree of intellectual uh, creation and exchange, which was facilitated by growing interconnectedness of North India internally and with the outside world. Okay? These were the socio-economic factors responsible for the emergence of medieval Bhakti. And finally, the religious and cultural factors that were responsible. क्या थे ये? First of all, the advent of Islam. This facilitated the emergence of medieval Bhakti in two ways. First of all, it represented an existential threat to the Brahmanical way of life, to the indigenous culture, and thus was able to elicit an urgent reform from the native culture, right? So, you can say the native culture urgently sought to reform itself in order to survive the existential threat posed by Islam. And second way in which the advent of Islam shaped medieval Bhakti, Islam had some very attractive qualities which the medieval Bhakti saints borrowed freely. So the attractive qualities of Islam, namely its emphasis on universal brotherhood, equality, and fostering a strong sense of community, were readily adopted by the Bhakti saints. ठीक है. Secondly, medieval Bhakti was able to flourish because of a very important trend that had emerged with respect to religious practice during this period. Till now, religion had been in the hands of only the Brahmanical priests. And what was the language of their religious expression and instruction? Sanskrit. अब किसके हाथ में आया था भक्ति मूवमेंट को लीड करने का रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी? Among popular leaders, are they going to continue insisting upon the use of Sanskrit only? No. In order to make their message as popular as possible, they are going to use regional languages, local languages. The use of local languages by the medieval Bhakti saints made their movement very popular. और क्या religious और cultural factors? The Bhakti saints were expressing their ideas at a time that at which the people had already been fed up of both the Brahmanical oppressive order as well as the Orthodox Islamic oppressive order, right? So they were able to utilize this pent-up frustration of the masses, especially the lower castes, in order to popularize their message. Okay? So there already existed, or there was already a great degree of pre-existing frustration among the common masses. And this was capitalized upon by the medieval Bhakti saints. People were looking for alternatives, and these medieval Bhakti saints were more than happy to provide them this alternative. Okay? So they had been able to capture the popular sentiment. Okay? So these were the factors responsible for the emergence of medieval Bhakti. तो जो इसका दूसरा वाला क्वेश्चन था, factors that Bhakti as a popular movement remained absent from North India during Rajput age. क्यों नहीं इमर्ज हो सकता था राजपूत एज में? Because the social, economic and political framework and machinery were dominated by the Rajput Brahmin alliance, which remained hostile towards non-conformist movements which the Bhakti sect represented. Secondly, the Rajput age was the age of feudalism, where free thinking, freedom of expression, religious freedom, social and economic liberties, they were all restricted heavily. Thirdly, the state patronized the Brahmanical cult, which was growing as a result of this state patronage. In fact, the Brahmanical forces had established complete religious and intellectual hegemony. People did not have the tool of critical thinking with them, so they were not in a position to challenge these forces at all. Further, the socio-economic landscape was characterized by self-sufficient village economies with limited social and physical mobility. Wherein the Varna Ashram Dharma system was could be implemented with a great degree of fidelity and success, with a great degree of effectiveness. And in this scenario, the popular sentiment was not in a position to express itself freely. This was a period of de-urbanization and urban decay. Thus, there was a decline in crafts production and other professions. Non-agrarian professions. एंड जहां पे भी मेजर सोशल या इंटेलेक्चुअल चेंज आता है, वहां पे ये वाले जो ग्रुप्स होते हैं इनका मेजर रोल होता है. सो जब एक्टर ही नहीं है तो एक्शन होगा? नहीं होगा, राइट? फर्दर, unlike after the advent of Islam, there was no urgency from the Rajput Brahmin alliance, from the Brahmanical social order to reform itself. Okay? So there was religious and intellectual stagnancy in North India. As a result, Bhakti could not emerge as a popular movement in North India during the Rajput age. ठीक है? तो आर्ग्यूमेंट्स हमने वही वाले किए हैं जो उधर किए थे, बस उसको इस तरह से पैकेज करना है, प्रेजेंट करना है. दैट इज गोइंग टू चेंज. क्लियर है इतना? तो जो अभी तक हमने डिस्कस किया है, क्विकली लेट अस राइट दैट डाउन. गिव द हेडिंग Bhakti movement, and under that पहला सब हेडिंग origin and rise of medieval Bhakti. Origin and rise of medieval Bhakti. Right. Medieval Bhakti refers to a popular social and religious movement which emerged in North India from the 13th century onwards. From the 13th century onwards. Full stop. It had a strong reformative component and stood for social and religious equality. Full stop. Sub point. Thus, it represented simultaneously against a reaction against the oppressive and feudal Brahmanical order, and a response to the cruel and oppressive Islamic power. Full stop. Next point. While medieval Bhakti, main point. While medieval Bhakti had its roots in ancient Indian culture, and represented the revival of devotionalism, as a popular movement in North India, after several centuries, it also borrowed liberally from Islam, especially Sufism. ठीक है, सब पॉइंट लिखो. Therefore, medieval Bhakti by nature was an inclusive cultural phenomenon. Sub point. Not only did it assimilate indigenous Bhakti and Sufism, full stop. Next sub point. It also assimilated both the high Brahmanical and the lower tribal culture. Next sub point, popular as well as feudal elements. Next sub point, and orthodox as well as liberal tendencies. Orthodox as well as liberal tendencies. ठीक है? Next sub point, thus by nature medieval bhakti was a heterogeneous movement, expressing itself in diverse manners over time and space. So medieval भक्ति का क्या आप कोई सिंपल स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड डेफिनेशन दे सकते हो? नहीं दे सकते हो. So it was essentially a polyphonic movement. At the same time, bhakti represented various things. For the Brahmins it meant something, for the Sufis it meant something, for the ruling class it meant something, for the Rajputs it meant something, for the urban poor it meant something, for the rich traders it meant something else, and for the orthodox Brahmins and the working class it meant something entirely different. तो यहीं पे इसी हेट्रोजेनस वाले पॉइंट में ही लिख सकते हो ब्रैकेट में, इट वाज अ पॉलीफोनिक मूवमेंट. इट वाज अ पॉलीफोनिक मूवमेंट. ठीक है? नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट, upon investigating the historical antecedents 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 of medieval bhakti, we discover that the cult of devotionalism is inherent in ancient Indian culture. While the earliest roots of bhakti can be traced to the Vedas and Upanishads, comma, the first proper expression of bhakti in the literary form, emerged with the Bhagavad Gita. भगवत गीता के साथ कौन सा स्ट्रीम ऑफ भक्ति इमर्ज हुआ? भागवतिज्म which later developed into North Indian Vaishnavism. ठीक है, cult of Vishnu emerged from Bhagvat only. Next point लिखो. इस तरह से लिखना, प्री गुप्ता एज कोलन. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, प्री गुप्ता एज, राइट डाउन, अप टू the post-Mauryan period, Bhakti primarily emerged as a philosophical response, primarily emerged as a philosophical response to Buddhism. क्या लिखा है? Up to the post-modern period, Bhakti primarily emerged as a philosophical response to Buddhism. Full stop. However, it remained confined to high philosophy with little practical effect on the lives of the common people. पोस्ट मॉडर्न पीरियड या प्री गुप्ता एज का जो भक्ति है, हाउ वुड यू कैरेक्टराइज इट? एज अ पॉपुलर मूवमेंट और अ फिलोसॉफिकल मूवमेंट? एज अ फिलोसॉफिकल मूवमेंट. लोगों की लाइफ्स को रियलिटी में कोई मेजर तरह से इंपैक्ट नहीं कर रहा था. नेक्स्ट, गिव दी, ऐसे शुरू करो, गुप्ता एज कोलन. ठीक है, राइट, गुप्ता एज. with the emergence of idol worship and the temple cult, Bhakti began emerging as a popular movement. Sub point, with the compilation of Puranic literature, Bhakti was established as the dominant religious practice. ठीक है. Now, these temples and Puranic literature were also performing the very important task of socio-cultural assimilation. कैसे? गुप्ता एज में एक वेरी प्रोमिनेंट प्रैक्टिस शुरू हुआ बाय द स्टेट नोन एज लैंड ग्रांट्स, एंड एज लैंड ग्रांट्स इंक्रीज्ड, प्रोलिफरेशन ऑफ लैंड ग्रांट्स हुआ, तो उसके साथ साथ क्या होगा? द एक्सपेंशन ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर. एग्रीकल्चर वाज नाउ एक्सटेंडेड टू दोज रीजन्स जहां पे इसके पहले कभी प्रैक्टिस नहीं हुआ था. सो अ लॉट ऑफ फॉरेस्ट लैंड वाज क्लियर्ड, wasteland was reclaimed, and tribal groups associated with the hunting gathering way of life were incorporated into the agrarian mainstream. Right now, each of these tribal groups maintained their own gods and goddesses. ये जो temples हैं और पुरानिक literature है, this created the avenue for the merger of those tribal gods and goddesses with some Vedic gods and goddesses. ठीक है, एंड यहाँ पे टेम्पल जो बनाए गए, वहां पर जो ट्राइबल डेटीज थे उनके इमेजेस रखे गए, लेकिन नाम क्या दिया गया आज से? जो वैदिक गॉड्स. ठीक है, So entire legends were now woven around them, and that is why Vishnu has how many avatars? 10 avatars. In every region, a different avatar. ठीक है, तो जो भी वहां का dominant deity था, he was incorporated as an incarnation of Vishnu. Next sub point लिखो. The combination of Puranic literature and temple cult played an important role in aiding the process of social and cultural integration or assimilation, social and cultural assimilation of tribal groups and belief systems, tribal groups and belief systems into the Aryan culture, and Brahmanical socio-economic mainstream. ठीक है? And what is this going to do? This is going to give an early shape to the emerging Hindu dynamics of society and religion. तो जितने भी हिंदुइज्म में आजकल गॉड्स एंड गॉडेसेस को रिकग्नाइज किया जाता है, उनका प्रोसेस कब शुरू हुआ, कब इमर्ज होना शुरू हुए? फ्रॉम दी गुप्ता पीरियड ऑनवर्ड्स. जो क्लासिफिकेशन ऑफ कास्ट हैं, वर्णास हैं, that was crystallized the diversity of the proliferation of caste that started taking place from the Gupta period onwards, and it was because of these two practices, temple cult and Puranic literature. Clear है? Next point लिखो. Gupta and post Gupta period. Gupta and post Gupta period. Write down. From the 6th century onwards, a decline became visible in North Indian Bhakti. Due to सब पॉइंट्स में लिखो A और B. A, the overshadowing of popular bhakti by tantricism, and B, the growing association of the bhakti cult with feudalism. The growing association of the bhakti cult with feudalism. ठीक है? Next point. Following this, subpoint. Following this, bhakti remained almost completely absent as a popular movement. Bhakti remained almost completely absent as a popular movement from North India for several centuries. For several centuries. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट, राइट, तमिल भक्ति, और उसके बाद से कोलन, ठीक है, तमिल भक्ति. While Bhakti declined in North India, while Bhakti declined in North India, it emerged as a major popular cult in the Pallava kingdom from the 6th century onwards. From the 6th century onwards. Full stop. Subpoint. Here the initiative was taken by the Vaishnavite Alvar and Saivite Nayanar saints. Full stop. And Saivite Nayanar saints. Many of whom came from the lower castes. Next point. Thus, early Tamil Bhakti represented a strong protest against the oppressive and unequal Brahmanical order. Full stop. Next point. Tamil Bhakti rejected the Varna and caste based hierarchy and accepted followers from all backgrounds. ठीक है. Next subpoint. The expression of intense love towards God through Tamil devotional songs and poems. Was deeply attractive to the newly assimilated tribal groups which had been brought into the socio-economic mainstream. By the expansion of agriculture. तो ट्राइबल रिलीजन का एक खासियत होती है that it is highly expressive and joyful. बहुत energetic तरह से अपने gods and goddesses को वो propitiate करते हैं. Massive processions are held. A great degree of fervor is seen while invoking the gods, while trying to appease them. तो through song and dance अपने devotionalism को express किया जाता है. This is relevant for all tribal groups. एंड जो इनका प्रोमिनेंट रिलीजियस प्रैक्टिस था ट्राइबल ग्रुप्स का, वही अब मेन स्ट्रीम ने भी अडॉप्ट कर लिया. सो नेचुरली this mainstream is now going to appear very attractive to these tribal groups as well. And since the tribals were given lower ranks in the Brahmanical social hierarchy, and the Alwar and Nainar saints opposed the Varna and caste based hierarchical order, therefore they appeared as advocates of these newly assimilated tribal groups. So Tamil Bhakti emerged as a massive popular movement, केवल philosophical movement नहीं था. ठीक है, next point लिखो, next sub point. Therefore Tamil Bhakti emerged as a massively popular socio-religious protest and reform movement. Protest and reform movement. Okay, ठीक है. Next main point लिखो, आचार्यास and then colon. However, from the 10th century onwards, Tamil Bhakti was gradually penetrated by Brahmanical elements known as acharyas. Such as Yamunacharya, Nath Muni, Ramanujacharya, Vallabhacharya, Madhavacharya, etc. ठीक है, they began promoting bhakti as a philosophy rather than a popular cult. As a philosophy rather than a popular cult. Next point. Their emergence coincided with the rise of Chola power. Which was searching for legitimacy. And thus entered into an alliance with the Brahmanical priests. The Brahmanical priests. ठीक है? As a result, Bhakti was transformed into an elitist movement and lost its reformative and popular character. ठीक है? Clear? In fact, सब point लिखो. In fact, Bhakti ironically emerged as a weapon that was used by the Brahmins to eliminate their adversaries. At this point of time, who were the adversaries of Brahmanism in South India? Buddhism और Jainism. ठीक है? Within brackets, बुद्ध लिख लो. Adversaries. Adversary मतलब enemies. ठीक है? Competitors. Adversaries within brackets, Buddhism and Jainism. ठीक है? Next point. Next main point. Within Hinduism, comma, the Acharyas resolved the growing conflict by striking a new balance. Full stop. While religious equality was accepted, comma, in society, the legitimacy of the unequal Varna and caste systems was also recognized. Thus, by the 12th century, Bhakti emerged as a socio-religious structure based on an alliance between the monarchy and the priests, expressed through idol worship and the royal temple cult. ठीक है? So both in North and South India, हमने क्या देखा है? That at different points in history, Bhakti remained either as a philosophical movement led by the elites, or a popular movement led by the commoners, or as a temple cult in the hands of the priest prince nexus. Elite led. ठीक है. By the end, both in North as well as South India क्या हुआ है? Elite led temple cult के through, जो कि royal cult है, the elites were able to maintain their dominance. Clear? Next लिखो. ऐसे ही लिखो यहां पर मेडिवल भक्ति. ठीक है, मेडिवल भक्ति. After the 13th century, comma, Bhakti traveled to North India. Full stop. One of the chief proponents was Ramanand. Full stop. Although he was a follower of Ramanujacharya, of the Ramanuja tradition, Ramanuja 12th century में थे, रामानंद 15th century, late 15th, early 16th century में थे. ठीक है, रामानुजाचार्य याद है ना, वो 12th century के फिगर है. रामानंद was a 15th century figure of the Ramanuja tradition, comma, he introduced certain innovations. Sub points में number 1 and 2. Number 1, he relaxed caste barriers and accepted disciples even from the lower castes. Full stop. Thus, he inspired many lower caste saints such as Saint Kabir, Ravidas, Sena, Pipa, Gopa, Dhanna, etc. Another thing that the acharyas were doing was to revive the use of Sanskrit. लेकिन भक्ति के लिए संस्कृत क्या बहुत यूजफुल पॉपुलर मीडियम होगा? नहीं होगा. That is why Ramanand discarded Sanskrit and emphasized upon the use of local languages. Second लिखो. Further, he discarded Sanskrit and emphasized upon the use of Hindi. Which dialect of Hindi? Awadhi. ठीक है, within brackets Awadhi dialect. Full stop. Next sub point. Yeah, next main point. Following this, The Bhakti ideology proliferated across North India, finding several advocates as well as followers. ठीक है, तो ये हो गया the evolution of bhakti towards the origin of medieval bhakti. Next subheading लिखो, factors responsible for the emergence of medieval bhakti in North India. Factors responsible for the emergence of medieval bhakti in North India. Write down. Bhakti in the historical sense, was a long drawn, complex and diverse phenomena. Full stop. The historical time span of bhakti is more than 1000 years, from the ancient to the medieval age. Full stop. Naturally, no single factor can be attributed to the emergence of bhakti as a popular movement in medieval India. Full stop. Rather, it was the outcome of a combination of political, socio-economic, religious, and cultural factors. Number one, political factors. Write down. The destruction of the Rajput Brahmin alliance with the onset of Turkish rule removed the strongest opposition for the emergence of non-conformist ideas and religious practices. Full stop. In other words, the decline of the Rajput Brahmin alliance created the intellectual and political space for the emergence of Bhakti sects. ठीक है? Next, write down. The establishment of Turkish rule also resulted in the decline of feudalism in North India. Full stop. Consequently, comma, there was a rapid and sudden transformation of the social and religious landscape. Full stop. The restrictive apparatus of feudalism was removed, creating the space for social and intellectual mobility. ठीक है? Next, number 3, or sorry, next वाला लिखो, next point. The establishment of Turkish rule in North India represented the emergence of a state that was hostile to the Brahmanical worldview. Thus, the state also favored the anti-Brahmanical component of medieval Bhakti. Further, the state also stopped patronizing and supporting the Brahmanical order and Brahmanical culture. ठीक है, तो ये हो गए पॉलिटिकल फैक्टर्स. नंबर 2, सोशियो इकोनॉमिक फैक्टर्स. Write down. The establishment of the Delhi Sultanate, the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate resulted in the uprooting of feudalism, growth of trade, commerce, crafts production, and urbanism. Full stop. In this scenario, a large number of new craft groups and urban classes appeared. Full stop. They were looking for an alternative to the hierarchical and oppressive Brahmanical system. Full stop. तो इनके पास एक ऑप्शन तो था कि इस्लाम में कन्वर्ट हो जाए, कुछ लोग हो भी गए, बट इवन दोज हु कन्वर्टेड टू इस्लाम, they discovered that even within Islam they were subjected to the same kind of stigmas, the same kind of restrictions. They were given lower social rank, and thus they turned towards medieval bhakti. क्या लिखा है आपने अभी? They were looking for an alternative to the oppressive and rigid Brahmanical system, है ना? Unequal and hierarchical and oppressive Brahmanical system. In this scenario, comma, these emergent urban groups emerged as the chief proponents as well as beneficiaries of medieval bhakti. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. A major weakness of Brahmanism was its insistence upon renunciation or sannyas. Was their insistence upon renunciation or sannyas. for attaining salvation. For attaining salvation. ठीक है? This was becoming increasingly impractical. Increasingly impractical in the changing or in the rapidly transforming economic structure. Full stop. Sub point. Medieval Bhakti struck a healthy balance between spiritual and worldly pursuits. Worldly pursuits. Full stop. It emerged as an attractive alternative. To Brahmanism by rejecting the emphasis on renunciation. ठीक है? One more way in which the rejection of the importance of renunciation made medieval bhakti movements more attractive as compared to Brahmanism was that in Brahmanism, ये जो संन्यास है ना, that was regulated in accordance with the varnashram dharma system, right? It was available only to a very small minority of individuals. Firstly, half the population was automatically disqualified. That is, women were not allowed to undertake sannyas. तो उनके लिए संन्यास नहीं है तो मोक्ष possible नहीं है. Secondly, it would not be available to men belonging to the lower varnas. So if Shudras are concerned, they are not going to be able to attain it. And thirdly, by the time that people reach the stage where they could practically become renunciants, most of them would already leave this world, क्योंकि that was going to happen at the very end of life. ऐसा तो था नहीं कि स्टेज बाय स्टेज कोई प्रैक्टिकली अपनी लाइफ को एक्सपीरियंस करता है या फिर उसको बिताता है, राइट? एवरीथिंग लाइफ ऑलवेज हैपेंस इन full swing. So people wanted an alternative to this rigid varnashram dharma system and method, and medieval bhakti provided it. So write down next sub point. इसी में ही renunciation वाले भी. Secondly, by rejecting the importance of sannyas, to attain salvation, medieval bhakti effectively broke the shackles of the rigid varnashram dharma system, which strictly regulated the access to Spiritual salvation. Spiritual salvation. With this single stroke, with a single stroke, comma, the gates of heaven were thrown open to women and the lower castes. To women and the lower castes. ठीक है? नेक्स्ट अंडर सोशियो इकोनॉमिक फैक्टर्स ओनली, कितने? 2 लिख लिए ना आपने? हाँ, नेक्स्ट वाला लिखो, with the growth of trade and commerce, North India was rapidly connected internally as well as with the outside world. Full stop. Sub point. This encouraged the exchange of ideas and practices, and created the fertile ground for new ideologies and belief systems to emerge. New ideologies and belief systems to emerge. ठीक है? इसके पहले what was the most important period for an intellectual movement to have taken place? कब हुआ था इसके पहले इंडिया में इंटेलेक्चुअल और रिलीजियस फील्ड में कोई मेजर अपहीवल? महाजनपदा पीरियड, बुद्धा एज में. दैट पीरियड कोइंसाइडेड विद द सेकंड अर्बनाइजेशन ऑफ इंडिया. वहां पे भी सिमिलर ट्रेंड्स विजिबल थे. ये थर्ड अर्बनाइजेशन, यहाँ पे भी सिमिलर ट्रेंड्स विजिबल है. ठीक है? दैट इज द पॉइंट दैट वी आर ट्राइंग टू. कि जहां जहां पे अर्बनाइजेशन, ट्रेड एंड कॉमर्स, ग्रोथ ऑफ अर्बन क्लासेस, ग्रोइंग सोशल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट एंड कंपटीशन, जब ये सब चीजें होती हैं, ग्रोइंग इनइक्वालिटी होता है, then intellectual development also takes place because society is undergoing a great upheaval. There are many problems with which emerge. तो उन problems को solution देने के लिए कई सारे thinkers भी emerge होते हैं. This happened during the Buddha age also. This happened during the 13th century also, medieval period में भी. Next लिखो. Number 3, religious and cultural factors. Write down. The advent of Islam in North India paved the way for the emergence of medieval Bhakti. In the following manner. Subpoints 1 and 2. Number 1. Islam represented an existential threat to the indigenous culture and way of life. Full stop. Thus, there was great appetite from the native intellectuals to urgently reform, to urgently reform the indigenous culture. Full stop. Medieval Bhakti was the manifestation of this reformative program. Of this reformative program. ठीक है? Number 2, Islam also had several attractive qualities which were readily adopted by the medieval Bhakti saints to popularize their message. To popularize their message. Stop. These included belief in the ideas of monotheism, equality, universal brotherhood, and emphasis on strengthening community bonds. Strengthening community bonds. Okay, so among the socio-religious factors, religious and cultural factors, first is advent of Islam. How it facilitated the rise of medieval Bhakti, ये clear हो गया. Next main point लिखो. One of the factors responsible for the emergence of medieval Bhakti as a major popular movement was the use of local languages and popular culture. Local languages and popular culture to express devotionalism. To express devotionalism. So not only local languages, but also popular culture. Sub point लिखो. While Kabir preached in अवधि, comma, Guru Nanak popularized his message to the use of Punjabi. To the use of Punjabi. Surdas, full stop, Surdas expressed his ideas in Braj Bhasha and Mirabai expressed her love for Krishna in Rajasthani. Full stop. In Maharashtra, Marathi emerged as the language of Maharashtra Dharma. Maharashtra Dharma. While Krishna Bhakti in Bengal was popularized by Chaitanya through the use of Bangla, Bengali. Okay? By Chaitanya, Krishna Bhakti, while in Bengal, Krishna Bhakti was popularized by Chaitanya through the use of Bangla. ठीक है? Next sub point. Similarly, medieval Bhakti saints used popular mediums of cultural expression and entertainment. Popular methods of cultural expression and entertainment to popularize their teachings, beliefs, and practices. Such as, क्या यूज करते थे? म्यूजिक, राइट डाउन, म्यूजिक, डांस, folk theater, storytelling, painting, and sculpture. ठीक है? Is this clear? Next main point लिखो. The Bhakti saints were also able to capitalize upon the pent up frustration of the common masses towards both Brahmanical and Islamic orthodoxy. ठीक है? तो इफ यू रीड दी दोहास ऑफ कबीर, तो वहां पे कबीर क्या करते हैं, ही satirizes and ridicules both Brahminical as well as Islamic orthodoxy. If you read the poetry of Mirabai, वहां पे क्या देखने के लिए मिलेगा, her frustration and angst against the heavily exploitative Brahminical system in which she was completely isolated, she was boycotted by the society. और उनका एंगर, उनका फ्रस्ट्रेशन उनकी पोएट्री में झलकता भी है, राइट? तो राइट डाउन सब पॉइंट. दिस इज क्लियरली विजिबल in Kabir's satirical works, in Kabir's satire, where he ridicules the rigid ritualism of both Brahmanism and Islam, Full stop. He also exposes their hypocrisy and intellectual dishonesty. Full stop. Similarly, comma, Mirabai expresses her angst, angst, towards the rigid social setup that was responsible for her boycott and isolation. In fact, मीराबाई की जो पोएट्री है, it is called the poetry of isolation itself. ठीक है? Her boycott and isolation. So she is deeply critical of that social setup, right? And finally, इसमें एक और पॉइंट आप लिख सकते हो. Unlike the ancient Indian bhakti, next main point. Unlike ancient Indian bhakti, medieval bhakti saints focused upon building institutions. For example, Guru Nanak established the Sikh community through practices such as langar, emphasizing upon concepts such as sangat and pangat, by creating the institution of the guru, right? So he was able to transform his followers into a distinct religious group, into a distinct religious fellowship. And जो इनके बाद वाले गुरुज आए, they continue to further build upon these institutions. तो बाद में जाकर के अकाल तख्त का establishment हुआ. Then the Guru Granth Sahib was composed under the leadership of Guru Arjan Dev, the fifth Sikh Guru. Then Guru Tegh Bahadur established, Guru Gobind Singh established the Khalsa. And then उसके बाद जो गुरुहुड का पोजीशन है 10th के बाद खत्म हो गया. with the Guru Granth Sahib remaining as the permanent, perpetual Guru, right? तो अगर ये institutions नहीं बनाए होते medieval Bhakti saints ने, could their message have survived to this date? नहीं हो पाता, right? It would have disappeared with them. Because they were able to build institutions, they were able to secure their legacy. The same is the case for Maharashtra Dharma, the cults associated with Chaitanya, Krishna in Bengal, in Gujarat, in ये क्या बोलते हैं Vrindavan, etc. Then the same can be said for the followers of Kabir. तो Kabir Panthis emerge होकर के आए. They all these communities had a shared sense of oneness. उनको ऐसा लगता था that their economic, social, political interests are also the same. Therefore, they were able to engender a lasting legacy and they did not disappear immediately. Okay? So lastly, you can write. Lastly, by building lasting institutions, comma, the medieval Bhakti saints ensured not only their growing popularity, but also their enduring legacy. Their enduring legacy. Example, Guru Nanak was able to unite his followers into a distinct religious fellowship, based upon equality, brotherhood, and cultural distinctiveness. Equality, brotherhood, and cultural distinctiveness. Full stop. He achieved this by promoting the sense of equality through the institutions of Langar, Sangat, and Pangat. Through the institutions of Langar, Sangat, and Pangat. Full stop. Further, he provided a regional flavor. To his message by insisting upon the use of Punjabi. And transformed his religious order into a permanent entity by creating the institution of guru into a permanent entity by creating the institution of guru. Full stop. Next up point. Similar trends were also seen in the context of other medieval Bhakti sects. ठीक है? और finally conclusion. Therefore, medieval Bhakti was the result of the complex interplay of several political, socio-economic, religious and cultural factors. Full stop. It emerged as not only a religious movement but the most popular cultural movement in the whole of Indian history. Shaping Indian culture in an unmistakable way. Shaping Indian culture in an unmistakable way. Okay? So these are the factors that were responsible. Big question लिख लो. Analyze the factors responsible for the absence of Bhakti as a popular movement from North India during the early medieval age. Full stop. 200 words, 15 marks. ठीक है? तो ये हम ऑलरेडी डिस्कस कर चुके हैं. Factors responsible for the absence of Bhakti as a popular movement in North India during the Rajput age. वही आपको यहाँ पर expand करना होगा. हो जाएगा? ठीक है. So that is it for today. I'm ending the class now. कल की क्लास में निर्गुण and सगुण Bhakti followed by the cultural contributions of Bhakti, the historiography of the Bhakti movement and the role of women in the medieval Bhakti of North India. ठीक है? Online students, if there are any doubts, please let me know. Otherwise, I shall end this lecture.